Exodus chapter 20, verse 15, Thou shalt not steal. The eighth of the Ten Commandments, repeated by Jesus in 3 of the Gospels, and the foundation of business ethics for religions and cultures around the world for thousands of years. No surprise. For a society to function at all, it has to agree on standards of behavior, ethics, and create rules and institutions to enforce them. In terms of economics, the ethic of not stealing is an essential public good that protects private property and the sanctity of contracts. Because if human beings are driven by maximizing their self-interest, as economics presumes, there's always the incentive to cut corners. In fact, writer Ambrose Bierce once satirized the Eighth Commandment in verse, Don't steal, thou never thus compete successfully in business, cheat. That's been especially obvious in recent years, as unethical behavior has dominated the business headlines. Consider the case of Dennis Kozlowski, CEO of Tyco, who diverted $62 million of company money to his own use for little things like a $6,000 shower curtain, a $17,000 toiletry box. Or Ken Lay of Enron, who inflated company profits and conspired to conceal more than $1 billion in debt, or so it is alleged. Even America's favorite hostess Martha Stewart lied about unloading stock at a company she knew was about to announce bad news, news that killed the stock price, news Stewart had in advance from the CEO. Now, according to economics, humans make decisions, or should, by weighing the marginal costs against the marginal benefits. In terms of cheating, it might be pictured like this. On the horizontal axis, the amount of cheating. On the vertical axis, both the value of cheating, when we chart the marginal benefits, and the costs of cheating, say fines or jail time, for instance, when we chart the marginal costs. Now, these curves, or schedules as they're sometimes called, are gross oversimplifications, but just to give you the idea, MC, the marginal cost curve, is theoretically upward sloping. That is, each additional instance of cheating has a greater cost than the last. The marginal benefit curve is just the opposite. Each new instance of cheating, it assumes, returns a little less value to the cheater than the one before, in line with the law of diminishing returns. Now, by the logic of economics, you should cheat whenever the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost, and keep cheating until you reach equilibrium, beyond which the marginal cost is greater than the marginal benefit. But if, in the world of business, everything's just a matter of costs and benefits, some would say it's lost the spiritual dimension of ethics altogether.
The big joke is that business ethics is an oxymoron, i.e., you can't simply talk about ethics when you're talking about business. There are none.
Barbara Toffler is a professor of business ethics and thus thinks it isn't a contradiction in terms. The modern business ethics industry was born in the late 1970s, part of the political reform movement that swept the country after President Nixon was chased from office for his lack of ethics. Companies began advertising their ethics, and accounting and consulting firm Arthur Andersen, for example, spent millions to be seen as moral. This made sense, since they made money auditing big businesses, keeping the books and supposedly keeping them clean. To reinforce their image of goodness, Arthur Andersen made videotapes to explain the importance of morality.
Over the years, our family, our religion, our community and schools have helped to shape our values. Thou shalt not steal.
Here's another of their stars, Stu Leonard Sr., CEO of a discount dairy chain.
The most important single fundamental thing of success in business is to build your house on a solid foundation of integrity, of a solid foundation of ethics.
One hint that things were getting worse. Though Andersen hired Barbara Toffler in 1995, it was to help them make money, not clean up their act.
They hired me to sell services to clients. They didn't hire me to do work with them internally.
Oh, you were going to sell...
I was hired to set up a consulting practice in ethics and responsible business practices. I was not hired to do internal work at Arthur Andersen.
If she had, she might have learned that ethics at Arthur Andersen were preached more than practiced. It had, for example, okayed the books of corporate ne'er-do-wells like the high-flying, now-defunct Enron Corporation. How did a once irreproachable accounting firm become so compromised?
Everybody was making money. They were jumping on the bandwagon. They forgot what they were supposed to be doing. They forgot that they were watchdogs. They forgot they were protectors of the investor. And they became hotshot firms. You know, we're a big name. We can play with the big boys and we can make big money. And they did start making big money. So they too were seduced. I'll be honest with you, I stayed at Arthur Andersen probably longer than I would have because I liked the money that I was making.
One way to look at it, as the economy surged out of the recession of the early 1990s and the so-called internet boom took off, the marginal benefit curve shifted to the right. There were greater rewards for the same quantity of cheating in accounting and lots of other industries. As a result, the equilibrium quantity of cheating went up in the economy as a whole. Perhaps for this reason, in the late 1990s, Arthur Andersen's ethics consulting had petered out for lack of clients. Who wanted to think about ethics? But maybe it's a good thing that Andersen's ethics tapes, despite their lofty ambitions and earnest voices, quickly disappeared, never made it into your curriculum. Because Stu Leonard, for one, might have been a better model of sin than sincerity.
People that look for the shortcut, the prisons are filled with them.
But just 2 years after this tape was sent to schools all over the country, Stu Leonard Sr. pleaded guilty to skimming $17 million in profits, much of which he carried, the government reported, on tens if not hundreds of trips to St. Martin in the Caribbean, in amounts ranging from $10,000 to upwards of $250,000 in suitcases or even wrapped as baby gifts. Leonard was sentenced to 52 months in prison, which makes the ethical rule of thumb with which this tape ends almost surreal.
Would the boy you were be proud of the man you are? And I would say that the boy I was would be proud of the man I am, and I would wish that on anyone. If my dad, you know, were alive today, he would say, attaboy, Stu.
But the biggest surprise may be that anyone did jail time at all. For white-collar crimes involving Wall Street between 1992 and 2001, to take one example for which there's data, according to the Justice Department, U.S. attorneys prosecuted only 187 defendants. And while 142 were found guilty, only 87 did time, usually at a minimum security, so-called club-fed prison. As a percentage of total federal prosecutions, the numbers have gone down even further since. We'll end this video in terms of our graph. If the government, in an era of deregulation, loosens the rules, or at least loosens their enforcement, then the marginal cost curve tends to shift right. Lower costs for the same quantity of cheating. And if at the same time the marginal benefit curve is shifting right, meaning greater benefits, it should come as no surprise that you get a lot more cheating. A behavior that ultimately threatens to undermine the public good. That is, the ethical standards of behavior on which a successful market system is built are threatened. And in the end, those standards are a public good we all rely on.